Good morning, everyone. Thank you for those of you who woke up very early to come here this morning. I hope by the end of this interview there will be plenty of people in the room and it will start to fill up. Theo, I'm so happy to be with you today because Genesis AI has been in the news lately, last week, I believe, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But let's start with the very beginning and Genesis AI, what you do. People in the room are familiar with large language models, foundation models. You have a slightly different play because you're building something around the physical world and robotics data. And how is it fundamentally different from LLMs?
Hello, everyone. So maybe in terms of framing, we were all pretty impressed with ChatGPT and all the things it can do for us. And if you compare that with the state of robots today, it's quite different. Like, have you seen any robots in your life?
Yeah, I mean, robotic arms in car factories, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the extent of it, is like robotic arms doing the same thing all day with one camera looking down, or Roombas to vacuum floors. And so there is no reason that the same level of generality would not apply to robots. The issue is that today's robots are not very much based on AI. They're like very rigid and specialized, and they do the same thing all day. So what we're trying to do is bring the level of generality of internet foundation models to robots.
Can you give us an example of a concrete task that current robots struggle with and that something built on top of Genesis wouldn't struggle with?
Yeah, I think we can take it broadly. Like maybe like half of the economy is physical, whether it's like in labs to do experiments for pharmaceuticals, or like for services to make hotel rooms or hospital rooms, or at home to do your laundry, or for logistics to bring packages from one place to the other. But all of these places we don't have robots today because they just don't work.
I'm sure you've seen plenty of videos around what you can do in the future with robots. And we've seen these videos for maybe 10, 15 years. Why do you think right now is the right time?
I think there's a few factors. One is we have a recipe from like what made internet foundation models click is that we have large scale and diverse data from all of internet, and that gives you a very general, robust model. And the hardware costs are getting down very fast because China is pushing hard on hardware, and the US and Europe are following on that.
Okay. And when we talked a few days ago before the interview, you talked about your physics engine and that it was very special. Why is that?
So maybe the main bottleneck to getting general purpose robots is that we don't have large scale and diverse data. Like for Mistral, for example, we have all of internet. For robots, we would want a big data set of robot actions, like given a language instruction, like pick up the bottle, how can I move my legs and my arms to do that? And that's not an internet, so we need to proactively collect it. So what everybody's doing, like Tesla or DeepMind, for example, is like having a bunch of humans. Like it's pretty like impressive to think about it. So you have a bunch of humans with a VR headset and like motion capture device, just like Avatar, to show, and they capture the movements of the humans and transfer it to the robot. And that's the way we try to train robots today. And it's, like, as you can imagine, it's very hard to scale because you would need like hundreds of humans in a data factory. It's a bit science fiction. And one alternative is to collect synthetic data from simulation. So build a physics engine that mimics the real world and then train the robots in that.
Have you been to these labs where they film humans at scale?
Actually, yes. I went to China for a month in January, and there is one company called AGI Bot. They have like 4 floors with 300 robots and people collecting data 24/7. It's pretty impressive to see.
Okay. So let's talk about the news. A few days ago, you announced a huge seed round, more than $100 million. This doesn't happen very often. You've had a good list of investors, starting with Eclipse and Khosla, but also some French investors like BPI France, Alven, Euraseo, Drysdale, etc. I'm not going to mention them all. Were you surprised by the investor appetite to back Genesis?
Yes and no. Like, it was my first time starting a company, so I was a bit surprised by the whole process of fundraising. But there is a lot of excitement in the VC world right now for robotics because the opportunity is very big. Like maybe 50% of the economy is based on physical stuff, and like 5% of it is automated with robotic arms. and the long tail of tasks has not been automated at all. So VCs get excited by something big, and just like they were like really into crypto in 2021, right now they're into robots, and so it was a good time to leverage that. And then there's a lot of investor herd mentality of everybody wants to do robots right now, so that worked out well for us.
Were there some investors that didn't really understand what you were doing, but they were like, okay, Khosla is investing, I'm going to invest as well?
Yeah, a little bit of that in Europe. I think there's a lot of followership from Europe to the US, but not the other way around today.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I want to switch gear and talk about your personal story a bit. First, how old are you?
I'm 29.
Okay. And you recently completed a PhD at Carnegie Mellon on computer vision and robotics. I believe that's where you met your co-founder, right?
That's where I met my co-founder. I didn't complete it, actually. I dropped out twice.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that part. You worked at several AI companies, Skilled, Mistral. At Mistral, you had a front seat, like watching a great success or great rocket taking off. Why did you decide to leave this ship and start your own thing?
Yeah, so Mistral was a really good experience. I joined when we were 10 or so, and the team was super strong and super tight because we were all friends before starting the company, which reflected in everybody laughing in the office all day while coding. But I wanted to start something for a while, and I was exploring ideas actually during Mistral. And my co-founder, I realized you really need a lot of momentum to start something ambitious in deep tech. And my co-founder came back with a really good physics engine, and he had aligned like Neil Shen from Sequoia China as an investor, and it was like, okay, let's do it.
And what were you working on at Mistral?
I was working on vision language models, which is the models that understand images.
Yeah.
So I started the project.
For multimodal stuff, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And was it something at the back of your mind that at some point you were going to start your own company and become a founder?
I think so. I had been trying for a while. I dropped out from the PhD once to join a first startup, and then went back to PhD and dropped out for a second startup and ended up starting something.
Are you going to go back to this PhD at some point?
I think it's not happening.
What did you learn at Mistral that you can apply to Genesis now?
Maybe one thing that Mistral has done really well is the mindset around data. Of like most of what differentiates one foundational company from another is how much effort do you put in collecting data. And for internet foundationals, you have this big pile of internet data that is super messy in like textbooks, patents, so a lot of the IP is actually XML, PDF, HTML parsers to go and parse randomly structured data to nicely structured data for them all. And the transformer itself is 300 lines of code, very standard from one company to another. So that's a mindset we bring to robotics data as well.
And so do you think it's much easier to build an LLM because of this abundance of data on the web compared to robotics?
So in some way, I think the tech stack is much easier, but in other ways, it's very expensive cluster-wise, so the entry costs are harder because you need to raise massive rounds to compete with OpenAI, Anthropic, etc. That are like when Mistral started, OpenAI already had 3 billion revenue. That's a pretty hard challenge to go and compete from behind, and they've done a really good job at that so far. I think for us, it's slightly different. It's like the tech just doesn't work at all. Like all of our competitors, even if they raised 400 million, they have zero revenue, and we're much earlier in this robotics wave. There's a lot of enthusiasm, but nothing has been proven yet.
And so your challenge is there's data, but what about training, GPU supply, and things like that?
I think it's more table stakes. Like if you don't have them, you can't compete, but it's not that much of a differentiator.
You don't need as many GPUs as, let's say, OpenAI or Mistral?
I think not yet, because we build on top of models created by OpenAI or Mistral for understanding vision, and we transform them to understand robot actions.
Okay, and how do you feel about, I guess, open weight models? Is it something you're going to leverage as well in your pipeline?
So far, exactly when I say we build on top, is we build on top of open weight models.
Okay, and there's this trend happening right now. A lot of companies who have been releasing open weight models. We can see that the next release is not necessarily going to be an open weight model anymore. Not sure about Llama, for instance, if Llama 5 is going to be an open weight model. Do you think it creates a challenge for you?
maybe I'm optimistic, but I still think there will be some company that but it stays open because it's one way to put yourself on the map. Just like DeepSeek was not on the map if they had not released open source. So I think there will still be somebody who releases very close to the frontier open source.
Okay, so there's the physics engine, there's training data that is going to be, I guess, synthetic for you as well. Are you going to reproduce a bit of the physical stuff as well and film people walking around like this, or?
Yeah, I think beyond the physics, like there's 3 big sources of data that we can exploit for robotics.
Yeah.
One is internet, like you have videos, there is some understanding of physics. Another is real-world data, like the big robotic farms with a lot of people showing robots how to do stuff. And the first is like synthetic data from simulation. And we'll try to push all 3. What we are most differentiated on right now is the physics engine, and that's where we're starting from.
Okay, and sounds like you have a long road ahead before you start shipping something. Is it scary for you?
I think we selected the investors that are quite aligned with a long-term vision of we really want to unlock like the remaining 50% of GDP that's physical. It will take 3 to 5 years to deploy at scale. We can start doing POCs next year, but not meaningful revenue.
And POCs, do you have ideas of ideal customers that you can start with?
I think we're exploring broadly in like pharma, for example, to replace a lot of manual work from lab technicians, as well as very different but in services to do hotel rooms or hospital rooms. Like imagine a mobile robot with like 2 arms and wheels maybe, and doing 4 or 5 different tasks. It could be like clean the bathroom, make the bed. Is the kind of stuff we would want to try.
Sounds interesting. When you wake up in the morning, what's your main motivator? What drives you?
I think these days it's building the team. Like I'm pretty excited about it. We're building a very broad team with people from robotics, from physics simulation, from large-scale AI foundation models, and seeing everybody come together also from different cultures. Like we're 1 foot in Paris and 1 foot in San Francisco. And we have some people coming from, like a lot of the founding team is from China, and like seeing French people interact with Chinese people, the culture is very different in terms of confrontation, etc. Seeing everybody come together is really, really cool.
So it's mostly meeting smart people and being able to hire them and talk with them and be at the frontier of research. That's your thing?
I think it's like the spirit of a startup is we have one very ambitious goal that we're all aiming forward to, and we all together trying to accomplish it with zero politics and just trying to get stuff done, and that motivates me a lot.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of your competitors, skilled and physical intelligence, for instance. They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They make 0 revenue. I guess everything is still on the table. The cards are still out, and we don't know what's going to happen and who's going to win. But we've seen in AI some companies raising huge rounds, let's say H, for instance, and they haven't really panned out. We haven't really seen a product come out. They haven't really met the investors' expectations and even the potential customers' expectations. Is it something that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think so every day. But I'm still very optimistic. I think there's a lot to be built, and we have a good approach, a really good team. So.
Okay, so you're not the next H, basically.
Hopefully not.
And talking about competitors, so there are some startups starting from scratch, but obviously some big tech companies, they are well backed. They can attract talented engineers and researchers as well. I'm thinking about OpenAI, Meta, Google. Do you think they can be serious competitors in the future as well?
I think so. I think I'm more worried about big tech than I am about startup competitors, because even if we're coming as underdogs, like some of our competitors raised 400 million, they're famous professors. I still think our approach is better. Our team is just as strong. But big tech has a huge advantage in this AI wave that they have like massive capital. Even if OpenAI like raised 40 billion and pays people really well, they still lose $10 billion a year. We're seeing Meta give people insane offers today. I think it's pretty hard to compete with big tech, but the one thing that's in our favor and that might be slightly harder for Mistral, for example, is robotics is super new to these big tech companies. Like for Google to become a robotics company is also a massive leap. Like maybe only Tesla is the closest.
Tesla is the, okay. And because when they announced the robotaxis, there have been some interesting articles saying, okay, the robots are actually humans or controlled by humans. There's not much tech to it, and it's a bit fake. do you think it's going to hurt them in the long term?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Do you think it's going to hurt them in the long term to sort of fake it for now? I'm sure they're working on something impressive, but there's a lot of fake announcement as well at Tesla.
That's true, but so far they've shipped pretty well. I think I'm still pretty impressed with.
Okay, so you don't want to go down the same path, basically. Are you more worried about a competitor with more data or with more compute?
I think the competitor with the best data is probably the scariest. Because compute, you can just get investors excited, raise a bit more. And
so you mentioned earlier in the interview that you are based both in California and in France. Why is that?
So we chose, I think we had to be in San Francisco no matter what, because pragmatically, this is where there is the biggest talent pool across the board in AI and robotics. But France has super amazing talent in robotics, physics simulation, and AI. I've seen it really work really well for Mistral. It's a bit less competitive than it is in the Bay, where you have everybody like XAI thinking machines that are 50 meters away from you. So that worked really well for Mistral, and it's starting to work really well for us. It's easier to become among the best companies in Europe for robotics than it is to be at the top in the US, and so we're seeing a lot of talent.
Do you see a high talent density in France around robotics and AI?
Yeah, I think definitely. There's some really good companies like Wondercraft, for example, who's doing exoskeletons. They have some super strong engineers. Enchanted Tools has some really good people as well.
And you mentioned that tech companies in Silicon Valley, they're willing to spend a ton of money. Obviously, Meta has been doing the rounds because of the supposedly huge paychecks they are offering to new AI researchers and engineers. Do you think you can compete as a startup?
I think we can. Maybe the most expensive people is the AI people. OpenAI is doing $2 million a year entry offers today, which is pretty high. So we have to.
I'm doing the wrong job.
Maybe people with who are very early in their career and want to join something early and have a lot more ownership is the people we can convince.
Yeah, that's true. How big is the team right now?
Right now we're about 15. Yeah, maybe 5 in France and 10 in the US.
Yeah, everybody's going to own equity and going to jump on board a rocket, basically.
Yes, and it's also you own a big piece of what can be done, right? A lot of the Google people, there is 2,000 people doing the exact same thing, and a lot of politics of people trying to keep their work from others, which is sad.
Yeah. For the last few questions, I want to switch gear and talk about philosophical stuff. When we talk about artificial intelligence, there's the word intelligence in the expression, and around robotics as well. You're trying to build smart robots. What does it mean to build an intelligent robot for you?
Yeah, I think for robots it means being adaptable and generalizable. So you would want that's why we think foundation models are the path to that. Is you would want a robot that can do a different set, many tasks in many different environments, like in your kitchen, in a factory, as opposed to one robot doing the exact same task all day in the same environment. And this adaptability is what we would call intelligence. And
do you think you're going to be able to update them over time, and they're going to become smarter and smarter?
Yeah, exactly. I think you would get a new software release on your robot, and it can do new stuff. And ideally, it would be able to learn on the job. That's something that even for internet, language models, that has not really applied yet. They don't really learn on the job.
Okay, one last question, because we're nearly out of time. We talked a lot about the brain of the robots, but what is the ideal form factor? Is it a human robot or human-like robot or something else?
I would bet that the human form factor is the head of the distribution. You will have a lot, maybe 30% of robots will be humanoid, just because all of the environments we interact, we live in or built for us. But there will be a long tail of other form factors to do other stuff. It might not be ideal for, say, in a lab, for example, you might not want a human to do experiments because it's just very big and clunky.
Okay, Theo, thank you very much for this interview, and good luck with Genesis in the future.
Thank you, Romain.